VI letter 1 EBFT, South shape. The morning light filters through the window. Soft music hums in the background. You stretch and your back feels a little stiff today. It's the same feeling you've had all week. You pause, wondering when simple movement became so hard. There was a time when bending to tie your shoes was effortless. Now it feels like your body whispers a quiet protest. But this story isn't about slowing down. It's about waking up strength you still have inside. You don't need fancy gyms or heavy weights. You only need a little space, a calm breath, and a gentle bend. Today, we'll talk about a simple move called the knee-to-toe bend. It may look small, but it holds quiet power. Power to ease your lower back. Power to stretch your hamstrings and steady your balance. Power to remind your body it can still move with grace. This is not about pushing limits. It's about rediscovering comfort in motion. So take a deep breath, and let's begin this small journey of movement together. VI letter 1 EBFT, South shape. Margaret wakes up early every morning. The sun rises softly through the curtains. The birds outside sound cheerful, but her knees feel heavy. She sits on the edge of her bed, rubbing her legs slowly. The floor feels colder these days, harder somehow. She sighs and looks at the slippers waiting beside her. It takes her a few seconds longer than before to stand. Her back gives a quiet ache, a gentle reminder of time. She reaches for the wall for balance and takes her first step. The hallway feels longer than it used to. She remembers when she would dance down it, light and free. Now each movement feels like a small test of patience. Her granddaughter once asked her to play tag in the garden. Margaret smiled but stayed in her chair. She watched the little girl run and spin in the sunlight. A pang of longing hit her chest. Not sadness exactly, but the quiet wish to move again. She used to walk everywhere. To the market, to her friend's house, to the park on Sundays. She loved the rhythm of her steps, steady and sure. Then one day, bending to pick up a dropped key, she felt a pull. Just a small one at first. But over time, that pull turned into stiffness. She ignored it, hoping it would fade. It didn't. The stiffness crept into her mornings, her walks, her joy. She began avoiding stairs, short trips, even laughter that made her lean back too far. Her muscles grew quiet, unused and uncertain. She thought maybe this is just getting old. But deep down, something in her resisted that idea. She missed the feeling of freedom, the flow of her body moving easily. One afternoon, her neighbor Helen came to visit. Helen was in her 70s, always smiling, always moving. She bent down easily to pick up a dropped spoon, laughing. Margaret noticed how smooth it looked, how effortless. "How do you still move like that?" Margaret asked. Helen grinned and said, "A little practice every day. Nothing hard, just bends and breaths." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Bends?" "Yes," Helen nodded. "Knee to toe, it keeps the body talking." That phrase lingered, keeps the body talking. That night, Margaret thought about it as she sat by the window. Maybe her body wasn't weak. Maybe it was just waiting to be spoken to again. She decided to start small. Just one gentle movement before bed. She stood, held the back of a chair, and tried to bend. Her knees trembled, her back complained, but she smiled. For the first time in months, she felt her muscles wake up. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The next morning, she did it again. And again the day after. Each bend felt like a word whispered to her body, "I remember you." Movement, she realized, wasn't about youth. It was about connection. And that tiny moment, that small decision, was where her story of strength began. VI letter 1 EBFT, South shape. The next morning, Margaret sat by the window with a cup of tea. The sunlight touched her face gently, and she felt a quiet warmth inside. She wondered why her body had changed so much over the years? Why did simple movements now feel like heavy work? She thought back to her younger days, when her legs carried her anywhere. Her muscles felt alive then, ready for every step and turn. But as time passed, her pace slowed, and her muscles fell silent. Her neighbor Helen's words echoed in her mind. It keeps the body talking. Margaret smiled at the thought. She decided to understand what that really meant. She read an article about aging and movement. It said our muscles are like rubber bands. They stay flexible only when they're used and stretched often. Without motion, they grow tight and tired, like forgotten strings on a guitar. She nodded to herself, feeling that truth in her bones. The hamstrings, the article said, are the silent workers of the body. They connect the hips, knees, and lower back, 3 points of balance. When they weaken, the whole system starts to wobble. That's why bending, walking, or even standing can feel unsteady. The lower back, too, bears the story of our daily lives. Every lift, twist, and lean writes its own line on those muscles. Over time, if we stop moving, that story stiffens into stillness. It's not pain alone, it's memory, locked away. Margaret felt her heart stir with understanding. Her body wasn't failing her, it was protecting itself. It had simply adapted to less movement, less demand. She realized she had spent years sitting too long, moving too little. And like a quiet friend ignored, her body had grown silent. But silence wasn't the end, it was an invitation. An invitation to reconnect, to listen again. She thought about the knee-to-toe bend Helen mentioned. How such a simple act could awaken the body's natural rhythm. She closed her eyes and pictured the movement. Bending the knees softly, lowering the body toward the toes. Feeling the stretch in the back of the legs, the gentle pull below the spine. It wasn't about touching the toes, but about reaching with awareness. Each breath guiding the motion, each motion opening a little more space. The body and breath working like old friends, rediscovering their song. Margaret began to imagine every muscle as a thread of light. When she moved, the lights brightened, weaving warmth through her body. She could almost feel her lower back loosen, her legs hum with life. The science was simple, but the feeling was deeper than knowledge. Movement creates energy. Energy fuels balance. Balance builds freedom. And freedom, that's what she had been missing all along. She smiled quietly to herself, her tea long gone cold. The science of movement, she thought, wasn't just about muscles. It was about remembering to move with kindness. And in that gentle understanding, Margaret found hope again. VI1EBFT, South Shape. The morning was calm, filled with soft light from the window. Margaret stood in her living room, her hands resting on the back of a chair. Helen's voice echoed in her memory, gentle but firm. Knee to toe every day. It keeps the body talking. She took a deep breath and decided today was the day. No hesitation, no overthinking. Just movement, simple and honest. Her knees bent slightly as she inhaled. Her feet pressed softly into the floor, grounding her. She leaned forward, slowly, carefully, as if listening to her body's whisper. The pull behind her legs came first, a soft, stretching ache. Then her lower back joined in, warming like morning sunlight. She stopped halfway, not pushing, not forcing. Her breath guided her, steady and calm. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It felt strange but not painful. Her balance wavered a little, so she held the chair tighter. The room was quiet, except for the rhythm of her breathing. When she stood tall again, she felt a spark inside, a lightness she hadn't felt in years. It was as if her body had whispered back, "I remember this." She smiled and tried again. Down. Pause. Breathe. Up. The movement was small but full of intention. Each bend carried its own meaning, its own story. With every repetition, her confidence grew. Her legs began to trust her again. Her spine straightened with quiet pride. She looked out the window and saw the sky turning brighter. Something shifted inside her, not just physically but emotionally. For the first time in a long while, she felt connected to her body. No longer two separate worlds of mind and muscle. They were one, moving together. She laughed softly, the sound surprising even her. It wasn't a grand workout, not a big transformation. But it was something real, something hers. Margaret thought of all the times she had ignored her body's small requests. A stretch missed here, a walk skipped there. Now, each bend felt like an apology and a promise. A promise to care, to listen, to keep moving. She practiced a few more times, counting slowly. 1, 2, 3. Each bend deeper, more natural, like the rhythm of a song she once knew. When she finished, she sat down and felt the warmth spreading through her back. It wasn't sweat or strain, it was energy returning home. Her knees tingled, her spine relaxed, her breath came easy. She felt alive in a quiet, powerful way. And as she looked at her reflection in the glass, she didn't see age. She saw effort. She saw strength. She saw a woman learning to move again, one gentle bend at a time. Margaret whispered softly, "Thank you, body." And for the first time in years, she truly meant it. VI1EBFT, South-shaped days turned into weeks, and Margaret kept her quiet promise. Every morning, she stood by her chair and began her gentle bends. At first, she counted her movements like a student learning a new song. 1 bend, 2 bends, 3. Each motion carried the same care as a whispered prayer. She didn't rush. She didn't force. Her body began to respond with warmth and gratitude. The stiffness that once ruled her mornings slowly faded. Her knees no longer protested when she stood up. Her back didn't ache when she leaned to tie her shoes. She could feel a quiet strength building inside her. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was steady, like sunrise after night. She began noticing small victories each day. Carrying groceries felt easier. Reaching for a book on the lower shelf didn't make her wince. She found herself moving without thinking, her body lighter, freer. Her granddaughter came to visit one weekend. "Grandma, come play outside," the little girl said, eyes bright. Margaret hesitated for only a second. Then she smiled. She followed her out to the garden, barefoot in the soft grass. The sunlight warmed her face, and the earth welcomed her steps. They played a simple game of tossing a ball back and forth. Nothing too wild, nothing too hard. But when Margaret bent to pick up the ball, she noticed something. Her back didn't complain. Her balance didn't waver. She bent, lifted, stood smooth, easy, natural. Her granddaughter clapped and laughed. "Grandma, you're fast," she said. Margaret laughed too, feeling years melt from her shoulders. In that moment, she understood the quiet magic of movement. It wasn't just about muscles or flexibility. It was about reclaiming life, one simple bend at a time. She found joy in ordinary things again. Hanging clothes under the morning sun. Watering her plants without fear of losing balance. Walking down the street with steady steps and a soft smile. Even her sleep improved. Her back no longer throbbed at night, and her legs didn't cramp. Each day she felt her breath deepen, her posture grow proud. Helen noticed the change one afternoon over tea. "You move differently now," she said, smiling knowingly. Margaret nodded. "I feel different too." "It's the bends," Helen said, winking. "They work quietly." Margaret laughed, her eyes full of gratitude. She knew now that the secret wasn't in the motion alone. It was in the consistency, the kindness, the attention. Knee-to-toe bends had become more than exercise. They were her conversation with her own body. A way to say every morning, I'm still here, still strong. And each time she moved, her body answered, so am I. VI letter 1EBFT. South Shape Margaret woke up to the sound of gentle rain tapping on her window. It was her favorite kind of morning, quiet and soft. She stood by her chair, ready to begin her routine. But today, she wanted to do it right, to understand each movement deeply. Helen had told her once, the secret is not how far you bend, but how well you listen. Margaret smiled at that thought and began to prepare herself. She placed her feet shoulder-width apart, toes pointing forward. Her hands rested lightly on the chair for balance. She took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs slowly. Inhale for calm, she whispered to herself. Exhale for strength. Her knees softened gently, not locked, not tense. She kept her back straight, her eyes forward. Then she began to bend. Not too far, just enough to feel the stretch in her legs. Her heels stayed firm on the ground, her balance steady. She felt the pull behind her knees, the length of her hamstrings awakening. It was a quiet reminder that movement is a dialogue, not a demand. She lowered her body just a little more, then paused. Her breathing stayed slow, patient, like waves on a calm shore. Then with the same control, she rose again, vertebra by vertebra. Her spine felt aligned, her posture open. That was one bend. She repeated it, counting softly in her head. 2, 3, 4. Each bend felt smoother, her confidence stronger. But she remembered to stay mindful. If her balance wobbled, she tightened her grip on the chair. If her back whispered discomfort, she stopped. No pain, no rush. Helen's words echoed again. Listen first, move second. Margaret found that rhythm comforting. She began to notice small details she had missed before. The way her toes gripped the floor for balance. The way her breath guided each movement. It wasn't about touching her toes anymore. It was about touching awareness itself. She practiced for 10 minutes, taking breaks between sets. She drank water, smiled, and stretched her arms overhead. Her body felt alive, awake, balanced. She thought of other older friends who feared movement. She wished they could feel this same gentle strength. So she decided to share what she had learned. She told them to always start small, to hold onto a wall or chair if needed, to never push past what felt safe, and above all, to breathe, always breathe. Because breath carries motion, and motion carries life. When Margaret finished her practice that morning, she stood taller. Her reflection in the window looked calm, assured, peaceful. She knew now that safety wasn't about avoiding movement. It was about meeting it with respect. Every bend, every breath was a promise of care. And in that quiet promise, her strength continued to grow. VI letter 1EBFT. South Shape. The days rolled on gently, one sunrise after another. Margaret's mornings now began with quiet purpose. Her chair stood ready by the window, her shoes neatly beside it. Outside, the world moved at its own rhythm, but she had found hers. The first thing she did each morning was breathe deeply. Inhale, exhale, slow and steady, like greeting an old friend. Then came the bends, small, graceful, unhurried. Her body now remembered the motion before her mind even asked. Each movement flowed into the next, like a song her muscles sang. There was no struggle, only rhythm and peace. Habit had become her silent companion. At first, it was a daily reminder written on her calendar. Now it was simply part of her. She looked forward to it, as naturally as her morning tea. Some days her knees felt stiff, and she moved slower. Other days her body felt light, strong, full of energy. But she learned not to chase perfection. Consistency mattered more than intensity. Even a few bends were enough to remind her body she cared. She began adding small rituals to her routine, a favorite tune playing softly in the background, sunlight spilling across the floor as she moved. Sometimes she even lit a candle, the flame swaying like her breath. Each practice became a meditation, a conversation with life itself. Neighbors began to notice her glow. Her steps were lighter, her posture straighter. Helen smiled knowingly whenever they met on their morning walks. "You kept at it," she said one day. "That's the secret." Margaret nodded, her eyes bright with quiet pride. She now encouraged others at the community center. She showed them the simple motion, knees soft, back straight, breathe. Many were surprised at how gentle yet powerful it felt. Some couldn't bend far, but that didn't matter. Margaret reminded them, "It's not how deep you go, but how kind you are." They laughed, and together they practiced under the soft morning light. It became a shared ritual, a moment of calm for everyone. Margaret found joy not just in movement, but in connection. Her days grew richer, her nights more restful. She realized that habits are like seeds, small at first, then life-giving. Each repetition watered her strength, her balance, her peace. Even on days she felt tired, she still moved, even just once. Because motion, she learned, was a gift to herself. As months passed, her reflection no longer showed fragility. It showed grace, patience, and quiet confidence. Her body spoke again, not in stiffness but in steady rhythm. And every bend, every breath told the same truth. Strength doesn't fade with age, it awakens when you care. Margaret smiled as sunlight touched her face again. The world was still moving fast outside. But within her, every bend was a moment of peace, a whisper of life. VI_1EBFT, South shaped the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft gold. Margaret stood by the window, her body calm, her breath steady. She thought about how far she had come. Not in miles, but in quiet moments of movement and care. Her knees no longer trembled the way they once did. Her back carried her with ease and grace. Each bend, each breath, had become part of her story. She smiled, remembering the first hesitant movement months ago. It all began with a single decision: to try, to listen, to move with kindness. The world outside continued its rush, but she had found stillness. A strength that came not from youth, but from patience. She whispered softly, "Thank you, body, for not giving up on me." And somewhere deep inside, her body answered back, "Thank you for remembering me." The light faded, leaving only warmth in the room. Margaret closed her eyes and breathed one last slow breath. Knee to toe, she had learned to bend, to rise, and to live fully again. In that gentle motion, she found her peace.